Kendrick?
Yeah,
Kendrick?
this is it. You know, I recently closed a chapter in my life to begin a new one, and I felt it would be fitting to start a brand new unrealistic Minecraft world. You know, I originally created the old one with the incentive to try to make a realistic version of Minecraft that kind of fit the style of videos I'd been making. I enjoyed it because it was very different to the standard Minecraft route. You know, when it comes to making Minecraft worlds for your 2-week phase, I always did it with friends. I never really truly did a solo world, you know, and I felt, what better of a way to start a new chapter than to start a new world? And you know, don't worry, I actually plan to build some of the structures the exact same way in this world, just to have that nostalgic vibe, even though it's only like 6 months old. But I mean, look, I think it's time for a change. Just like in real life, sometimes you gotta start a new world, man. But anyway, today we're gonna be talking about living. You have to live to learn. You know, we as people always want to be at the destination. You know, we always want to be at the end goal. You know, we want to have the fancy house. We want to have the fancy clothes. You know, we want to have our future wife or husband. You know, we want to have it all. We're always thinking too far ahead, you know. And although there are people who are given everything from birth, you know, there's people who are just handed these things. To get to these points, you know, you have to learn things. You know, you have to work for it. You have to experience these things. And when situation happens, you know, when you feel sometimes that you're not at the place you want to be, you know, you feel like you're that guy or girl who's not complete. You know, you feel like you're kind of at odds with yourself. You're a distance away from where your friends and family are. You know, it's very easy to perceive other people in a better position than you, just off looks alone, off personality alone, of that small 5% that they'll give you. It's easy to compare yourself to those perfect aspects, you know. But you have to live to learn how to become this better version of yourself, you know. To be better. To get where you want to go, you need to learn how to get there. And learning comes from living. You know, even if you do nothing to improve yourself in the sense of knowledge. You don't read any books, you know, you don't do this, you don't do that, you know, you just live, you just exist, bro. You will learn something. Now, what you learn is subjective, you know, you could learn a lot, you could learn little, you can learn more. Like, there's different ways to learn, there's different things you can do to learn things. But by just living and experiencing life for what life is and what life can be and what life will become, you start to really understand if you're heading towards a way that you're happy with or unhappy with. And look, I think a core example of this could be how a lot of people in, you know, their young 20s and very, very, very early 30s. I don't want to say early 30s because I feel like it's not really early 30s, but you know, like they're kind of like early 20s to kind of later 20s and maybe early 30s. You know, you'll spend it going out, experiencing things. When you're younger, you'll probably be a bit more into the drinking side of things or the drug doing. You know, you'll travel, you'll experience things. You know, you'll party hard. You know, you'll question things. You'll start to develop a real identity in all these things. And then after a while, you start to think, am I satisfied? Am I happy with how my life is going? Am I happy with where I'm at? Am I unhappy? If I'm happy, why am I happy? If I'm unhappy, why am I unhappy? And you start to just question things, you know? We're very quick to talk about what we dislike and what we don't want to do. And usually because we've associated things with, you know, pain, things that are bored, you know, boredom, things that we don't enjoy, you know, distasteful things that cause us displeasure, you know, dissatisfaction. And to even learn these things and to understand why we dislike them, you just have to exist and live. You know, you don't need to be this self-improvement guru who knows all these things and does all these things to better their life to learn things. You know, you don't need to watch a million self-improvement videos like this one to understand these things, because you don't need to understand anything. You just need to live. You just need to keep moving forward and keep experiencing life. You know, every day I learn something. What I learn might be small and insignificant, but it adds up over time. You know, in a year's time, I'll look back at this moment, or I'll look back at what's happened a year from then, and I'll think, damn, a lot's happened or a lot's changed since then. You know, you really start to look at what's happened and what's happening, you know? And sometimes you need to give yourself a little bit more of a push or a kick up the arse, you know, to be able to look at what's happened over the past few months and, you know, really move towards a change. But to get to that point, you need to experience it. You know, you need to wake up every day and move forward. And that doesn't mean you have to force yourself to do things like trying somewhere new, talking to that person, you know, flying overseas, taking that trip, you know, pursuing that endeavor. Like, I'm not going to tell you what you should and shouldn't do, but I will tell you that you need to do something. Something could be waking up every day and doing the same thing. Because eventually, if you dislike it, you'll get to that point when you realize you dislike it. You know, I could tell you all the things you should and shouldn't do, but is that going to stop you from doing them or changing? Probably not. But what I can tell you is that you will get to a outcome regardless of whatever you do. And that's when you learn. You know, we run into roadblocks very, very often in life. You know, eventually a bad day is going to come. You know, eventually somebody's going to die. Eventually a health issue will come up, or eventually some super positive or super negative will happen. You know, it's just how it is, you know? Like, I can't pretend like that's not the case, but you shouldn't be living every day waiting for that moment. But every day more that you live gets you every day closer to something good, something bad, or something normal. So when you get to these roadblocks or these points where these lessons in life show up, how you choose to handle and use that information is really up to you. You know, if you decide to ignore it and just take it as a life moment or that's life and move on, that's a choice that you've learned how to, you know, deal with things. If, you know, you're dissatisfied, you're deeply upset with where you're at in life and how things have happened, then you'll learn something from that. You'll learn that, you know, this is how I feel. Same thing as something really good happens, you know, you just love your life again. You know, you learn that, hey, I really enjoy my life right now. Like, it might seem small and insignificant when we word it like this, but this is really how it is. You know, every single moment that you live, you know, gives you that new opportunity to grow. And that's why, you know, you might find some people who are older who have either become very wise or very immature and ignorant. You know, some people learn and go down different paths. Others, you know, just live and push things to the side. But regardless, in essence, neither side is wrong or right. Obviously, you know, we have our own personal opinions on what's wrong and what's right and how someone should and shouldn't live. But ultimately, they're making the decision to do what they've done, whether positive, negative. It's just how life works. It's just how people do. And, you know, that doesn't excuse terrible things. That doesn't excuse terrible behavior. You know, that doesn't excuse wasting life and being ungrateful. But at the same time, someone's made that conscious decision and learned to just ignore things. Same thing as where if someone learns about why things are wrong and how to be a better person and how to, you know, do whatever, they learn those things. You know, like, everything is just about living. Being present, you know, moving forward in life, embracing everything. And of course, you know, if you want to learn more, you want to be better, put in those hours, put in that effort, man. You know, go look for ways to increase your knowledge, find ways to make your life better, because in a sense, you are learning more about yourself. You're literally learning by trying to learn. That's the best part of it all. You know, you're always learning something. Even in this video, you might have learned about learning. And I know it sounds dumb to say it like that, but really, man, learning is like breathing. Well, not really, but kind of. You get the sentiment I'm going for. But look, regardless, just live a little bit more. Get out your head, man, and, you know, go for a walk or some shit. And you might even learn that going for a walk makes you feel a little bit more at peace. But anyway, that's it for today's video. No pun intended, but I hope you guys learned something from this. I'll see you on the next one.